Well, Omar Shakir joins me from Chicago, Human Rights Watch, Israel and Palestine director. Big developments in the last few hours. We don't know where it will go, but positive or cautious optimism is the flavour right now. How do you assess what's happened in the last couple of hours?
Look, I mean, for the people of Gaza that have withstood 2 years of unimaginable horror, daily mass killing, starvation, forced displacement, destruction at a scale without precedent in the modern history of Israel-Palestine, this is a moment of hope. It's also a moment of hope for the, dozens of hostages, the 20 or so that are alive, and the families of all the others that maybe their fate, will be known, and hopefully they'll return to their loved ones. So you have to start with acknowledging that this is, something that is a long time coming. The release of hostages, the entry of aid, so critical, so badly needed. Hundreds of people have died of malnutrition, likely thousands more as a result of dehydration and the systematic attacks on hospitals. All of these things did not require a ceasefire deal. These are binding obligations of the parties to facilitate the entry of aid, to release those unlawfully held, to not commit unlawful attacks. They should have happened long ago, but the fact that there is hope that they'll end in the coming days is positive. Of course, nothing is guaranteed. We've seen many examples of that, not just in the last 2 years, but in the last 75 years. And so we obviously need to be cautious. There are many risks, not only in Gaza, but in the West Bank and across the region. But certainly tonight is a night of some hope after 2 years of an unending nightmare.
Indeed, but it's impossible to get away from the more difficult questions that lie ahead, the thornier issues in all of this that have not really been addressed and are only vaguely spoken about in Donald Trump's 20-point peace plan. What happens in Gaza beyond this in terms of governance and for the future of Hamas and disarmament, and what happens there?
That's precisely where I think there's a lot of risk. And if history in Israel-Palestine has taught us anything, Oslo and the decades of worsening repression as peace processes played out, is that peace processes cannot be relied upon solely to end grave abuses, right? The reality here is for too long, states have treated, the peace process as the panacea, the cure-all for apartheid, for crimes against humanity, for acts of genocide. But the reality here is, while everybody hopes that there is a political solution, states have duties, and action and pressure is ultimately what's necessary to actually get basic rights realized. Otherwise, these are words on paper. And when it comes to Israel-Palestine, whether it's the right of return, whether it's the illegality of the occupation as found by the International Court of Justice, whether it's arrest warrants for Prime Minister Netanyahu, these are all words on paper unless there's real action taken pursuant to legal duties to end these mass crimes. So states should not wait. They should not hit the pause button when it comes to arms embargoes, targeted sanctions, suspending preferential trade deals, executing the International Criminal Court warrants. These actions need to take place irrespective of what happens on the political side, whether the Trump deal holds or not, because ultimately these are binding duties, and ultimately peace deals are only part of the equation. The realization of human rights requires much more and requires justice and accountability and the action by states to make that happen.
But when it comes to justice for Palestinians, will it take root and branch reform of the ICJ, the International Criminal Court, as well? Because up until this point, it is not completely, but has been largely toothless when it comes to bringing people to justice, particularly Israeli people like Benjamin Netanyahu, a warrant for whom is already been issued.
I would disagree with that characterization. I mean, the International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for Prime Minister Netanyahu and for former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. There are ongoing investigations, and there are possibly more warrants to come. The issue is lack of political will, and we've unfortunately seen some states that have said that they would not execute the warrants or have failed to carry them out pursuant to their duties. So ultimately, that's a problem not of the international institution like the ICC, but a problem of the lack of political will. And of course, now we see the United States, which has issued sanctions against the courts, some of its prosecutors, its judges, as well as leading Palestinian human rights organizations advocating for justice. States need to rally around to support the court, to defend its independence, to commit to executing the warrants. So I think the court is doing its job under very difficult circumstances. The problem is the double standards of states in the global north, allies of Israel, like the United States, and like some leading countries in Europe, Canada, Australia, that sometimes haven't had consistent positions when it comes to international justice.
And when it comes to Donald Trump and how far he will see this through, I mean, there's a Nobel Peace Prize to be won. Of course, that's to be announced later this week. Do you feel confident that once this has been achieved, this first phase, Donald Trump will continue to drive this process forward? Certainly his positivity has added momentum to it.
Look, I mean, let's be clear about one thing. Certainly, there has been some momentum and pressure, and that's brought to arrive to the outcome that we're seeing unfold in front of us. Which should be recognized. But at the same time, let's not forget the U.S. is not a neutral party here. Human Rights Watch has said that the United States has found the United States not only complicit in Israel's war crimes, but it's actually a party to the armed conflict in Gaza. It actually has provided intelligence and coordination for operations. So the United States here has been directly involved, and this is not just a Trump administration thing. This goes back to the Biden administration. So we've seen the Trump administration, beyond the sanctions I mentioned, earlier this year, directly call for the full ethnic cleansing of the population of Gaza with his Trump Riviera plan. So the reality here is the United States has always had leverage. They have provided the Israeli government with billions of dollars in arms. It is bound, in fact, to stop providing arms to the Israeli government, but it hasn't done that. So, the record of the Trump administration actually using its leverage here is not significant. It's not significant. So ultimately, yes, this deal, what's been written on paper has been written on paper. Let's see what happens in the days and weeks and months ahead. It's quite likely the Israeli government, as we've seen with ceasefires in Israel-Palestine as well as across the region, will not stick to the letter, of that agreement. And will the United States be willing to use its leverage? Will it continue to insist and push upon the realization of justice and human rights? There's every reason to be skeptical. And ultimately, we can't just depend on the United States. It's why states in Europe, it's why allies like Turkey and Saudi Arabia and Qatar, it's really important that they continue to press the United States and to take action, because ultimately it's action and not words that make an impact when it comes to human rights and justice.
And finally, Omar, you mentioned the Riviera plan, the Trump Riviera plan. I mean, how concerned are you that one of the architects of this current 20-point peace plan is Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who doesn't have an official role in the White House, but has been, we understand, very influential in getting the deal to this point, not least because of his contacts and his business dealings with the Arab states, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia?
I mean, certainly that is a concern, but let's be clear here, right? This policy, it's not just about what Kushner says or what some other official. We're talking about deep U.S. complicity that spans the Trump administration, that goes back to the Biden administration. So this has really been a policy that goes back across parties, across administrations, unfortunately, over the last 2 years. So I think there is certainly reason to be concerned about, some of the individuals involved here. And again, it just underscores the critical point that states need to take action. This is not, a day to breathe easy and to back off. It's a day to, it's a time to put the pedal to the metal, because these are critical hours, days, weeks, in terms of what could come to fruition. Many people have described what's happening in Gaza as a continuation or as a second Nakba. We saw what the weeks, days, months, and years after the first Nakba meant. And certainly, there are people still living today that have not had their right to return realize that words went on paper but weren't realized. So we have to learn that ultimately action is what's going to get change. And and so states need to be skeptical, certainly, of everybody involved. Welcome the positivity, but really take action to ensure that justice and human rights is achieved for all.
Armstrong's shift is finished. It's Adnan Nawaz in the studio. Omar, thank you so much indeed.